Welcome to the Juniper Podcast, where we talk about the more nuanced aspects of having a pet with some of the most interesting people in the pet space. I'm your host, Allison, the founder of Juniper, and I'm joined by Haley, writer from Juniper. Take us along on your daily dog walk and don't forget to sign up for Juniper. It's free and you'll get access to articles, guides, and discounts on the best pet brands and more at www.juniperpet.co. Let's get into it. Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Juniper Podcast. I'm Allison. I'm here with Haley from Juniper as well. And today we have a very special guest, Ivana Tay, who is the founder of Playfield and inventor of the Bailey Kit. The Bailey Kit is their proprietary patent-pending modular dog walking system, which I already have one of and I really love. My favorite part about it is putting the water bottle in like the extra part that hangs off. We'll put a link, obviously, to the Bailey Kit in this and everybody can see what I'm talking about. But it's so great because everything I had before for walking my dog was missing. Where am I going to put the water bottle? So that to me is one of the best parts of it. But Ivana spent 8 years at Google before starting her pet brand, and we're super excited to learn from her. So we'll just dive right into it. So welcome to the show, Ivana.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm so excited to be here. And also, thanks so much for supporting Playfield. That really means a lot.
Yeah, I'm super excited about pet brands. Obviously, we've been looking at so much stuff since starting Juniper. And when I got connected to you and saw what you were launching, I was just really excited. I love to see new things in the space, especially from other female founders and ex-Googlers and all of that. So super excited to have you on the show. I think a lot of our listeners are dog moms, dog dads, all sorts of people in the pet industry. But I think that there's always people who are very interested in these stories about people like you who are doing something different. So can you tell us a little bit about, I guess let's start with your dog. How did your dog help inspire you to start this company?
For sure. So I think, timing was a big part of it. We welcomed Bailey into our lives in 2021. So this was peak pandemic and she's my first dog. I'd only had parakeets before, but managing a dog is very, very different. And she's just the sweetest. So she's a Labrador mix with Basset Hound, German Shepherd, Husky, and American Pit Bull Terrier. In the pandemic, we weren't going out and meeting a lot of people. So I think from a socializing aspect, it was really nice to have her. And we definitely did our best to rearrange safe play dates with other dogs so she could have her socialization as she grew up. But she's been a big part of, I think, even my journey, since leaving Google from New York and then moving up to Canada, we really did not have a massive network. So we invested a lot of time with Bailey and she's just a member of the family. So we're so blessed to have her and she's already 3.5 years old now. So I feel like the time is flying by. That's the one thing I would love to slow down, but that's how it goes when you have a dog.
Yeah, I can so relate because Addie is my first dog as well. My first adult dog. Yeah, since I had a dog growing up when I was really, really little. And then I was a cat person for a very long time. So I'm sort of secretly still a cat person. But this is my first company in the pet space too. And so I would love to hear a little bit about how you came up with even the idea for the product itself. So the product itself is a dog walking kit. Maybe describe it a little since we're on a podcast. We will, like I said, we'll link to it and show it, but would love to hear you sort of describe it for people who haven't seen it yet.
So I can actually show it on video and I'll talk through it as well, but it's essentially a really modular, multifunctional dog walking system. So I think going back to why I started this in the first place. So when we got Bailey, I would take her out for walks at least 3 times a day. So I found that I was constantly switching out my personal things with a bag and then switching that out and then sort of having some things in my pocket, but felt like I couldn't bring everything with me, or it was just a very incoherent mess, or I would forget things at home. And I wish that there was just a better system that was, very aesthetically pleasing, but also really well made and kind of designed for the modern dog owner in mind, because I have a lot of things with me, right? So this is the Bailey Kit inspired by Bailey. And it's a 2-part system. So you can kind of mix and match it and build it however you want. But essentially, the main part of it is a sling bag. We call it the Bailey sling bag. Doesn't look like a lot from face value, but there's kind of packs a punch. So in the back, there's a poop bag dispenser. So you can put 2 rolls of poop bags in here. They come out through the back, so you don't have to carry that plastic dingling green container that everyone seems to have. And on the inside, all the other things too. So you can ditch your wallet, carry your credit cards with you, cash, your AirPods if you're going for a longer walk, your keys so you don't forget your house keys or keys potentially. And what people seem to be really excited about is the hidden water bottle pocket. So it's zippered through the back, so it's super discreet. You don't see it from the front. And when you need it on a need basis, you pull it out here. You can put a water bottle in here, close it up with the drawstring closure. And that way, if you're going for a longer walk or a hike, you can bring water with you. But other people have actually been putting things in here as well, like tennis balls, sunglasses, umbrellas, even. They told me in a pinch, they put a Costco hot dog in here as well. So like whatever you need, it really serves that purpose. And you can wear it across the body. You can also wear the bag around the waist if you're going for more intense walks. And then there's like a D-ring here, so you can clip on your dog's leash if you want to go hands-free. And then just very quickly, here's the other part of it, which is the treat pouch. So we designed this to be, again, just like nice and compact. I think a lot of the treat bags out there are really clunky and they're hard to clean. So for us, we wanted it to be super accessible. So there's a magnet flap for you to reach in and grab the treats easily. You can also zipper it to close it. And then the inside pulls out so you can clean it. You can get all the treats and crumbs out. And then the back has a belt clip so you can wear it on your pants. You can clip it on. And that's kind of what we're starting with.
It's just so smart. There's so many things that you've wanted. If you've walked a dog at all, like you will recognize how all of these design elements came to be in this product. I love it.
Oh, I appreciate that. That really, really means a lot. And again, like I think our thesis here was, we really want things to be truly hyper functional. Everything needs to serve a purpose. It needs to make your life a little easier. How do we remove the friction? How do we also make things really high quality? So we were very intentional about every piece of this, and even the suppliers that we're working with. Some of the suppliers are Blue Sign certified, so they pass very rigorous standards for environmental standards and just how they produce things. So yeah, all of that's very important. This is the one thing we're starting with, but we're just beginning and we're hoping to do so much more.
And it looks so good, like aesthetically. It's not this dog walking bag that is separate. Like I would also be happy to just go out with my husband, just the two of us humans wearing that bag. That would feel totally appropriate.
Yes. And I think the idea for that too is, your life with your dog is not so separate from your everyday life, right? I think it's just so interwoven. Bailey hardly leaves us. We hardly leave her. So we needed things that kind of fit seamlessly between our lifestyle and our lifestyle with Bailey.
So we got to see the product and it looks very exciting. What would you say has been the hardest part of starting a brand from scratch? I mean, we've been trying to do this with Juniper and there's so many pieces that go into it, especially having a physical product like that.
Oh, totally. I think, honestly, I feel like when you're starting a company from scratch and you've never done it before, every single thing that you do, you're learning for the very first time. And Allison knows this because I've asked her for help on like, well, how do you think about affiliate? How do you think about this? But you just don't know until you do it. But you also need to learn how to do the thing unless you're outsourcing it to someone who's an expert. So I think in the beginning, things just take a little extra longer because you're doing additional research. You're trying to educate yourself. Like, for example, when we first started, I tried to sew my own prototype. And that was really just came out in this like horrible mess. And I was like, okay, I need to hire a product designer. But first of all, how do I find a product designer? So I talked to agencies, I talked to freelancers, I interviewed a ton of different companies before I found someone who was the right fit for us because we wanted someone with experience with the outdoor bag industry and then went from there. But again, you just don't know anything until you start and you try to remove as much of the hurdles as you can, really try not to make mistakes. But sometimes I think that's just part of the process.
I think so many people have dreams of starting something, or they have an idea for a product or a vision for a company. Especially, we need a lot more of this in the pet space. So I hope people who are listening with dogs who thought of wanting to launch something will be inspired from hearing from you. But like, how do you deal with, I guess, the feeling of like overwhelm that you do have to figure out all of these new things that you've never done? Because there's no handbook for this.
That's so true. I know it's odd that there's no handbook for it, but I think it's also because the start of a business can take on so many different shapes and forms, and a lot of people get started in many different ways. I think in terms of, not getting overwhelmed, So prior to starting Playfield, I had been thinking about this for a very long time, just like thinking about starting a company in general. So I listened to a ton of podcasts. I was like binge listening NPR is how I built this during the pandemic. I read a ton of books about startups and how to get started. And then I also, in my spare time, reached out to a lot of founders and entrepreneurs, even when I was still at Google. So starting those conversations, building those relationships so that when the time came for me to actually get started, I had learned a lot already or learned from those around me. And then when I was going through the motions, I had people in my contacts that I could send an email or even a quick text and ask them the question of like, well, how did you do this? Or how did you think about this? Or did you encounter this before? So you really don't have to do it alone. And these days, there's also so many communities that are available, Juniper being one, right, of dog owners. And then there's, Female Founder Club. There are other groups out there as well. You can join on Slack. So there's virtual groups, but I think the communities are out there. You just have to be very proactive about seeking them out.
I love that support, highlighting the community pieces. I feel like so many of us, especially so many of us women, can struggle with imposter syndrome. All three of us on this call right now have our first dog as an adult. And it feels like there are people who have been doing the dog thing for so much longer, and it can feel really intimidating to break into that. So I really love that you call out all of the different communities to sort of get that support and that encouragement and stay confident in your ability as an individual to bring something new to the table.
We're going to take a quick break and hear from one of our sponsors, and then we'll be right back. Ever wonder what you should be feeding your dog? I always say the best dog food is the one your dog will eat, that you can afford, and that your vet approves of. That's why we love Optimal here at Juniper. Their food meets European quality standards and is full of prebiotics, omegas, and superfoods that your dog will love. To save 20% with your Juniper discount, visit the link in our show notes. Okay, we're back with Ivana Tay, who's the founder of Playfield. We're learning so much about how to start a pet brand totally from scratch, which I'm so inspired by. So thanks for being here.
I'm going to jump right back in with something that I'm really curious about, because I also had a full-time job that I really enjoyed, went out on my own. That can be a really scary process. How did you decide to leave your job at Google, which so many people think of as this dream company, right? It's still such a popular place to work, and to go all in on your own product?
It's a really great question. It was definitely a journey. And again, coming back to timing, I think the pandemic played a role in this. So at the time, I was still in New York working full time at Google, and it was peak pandemic. It was March 2020, and the offices had shut down. We were, sheltering at home. So that's also when I started binge listening to the podcast. Like I would wake up in the morning, watch master classes. I was watching the one by Sarah Blakely, where she actually talks about how she built Spanx from the beginning. So I took a lot of notes from that. And I just found myself like wanting to do more of that rather than my actual job. And so I was just deriving more energy thinking about the products I could bring into life. And this was before we had even gotten a dog. So the thought of hadn't crossed my mind yet. But fast forward, we ended up leaving New York and moved up to Canada for my husband's job. And I think at that point, I had been at Google for 8 years. I was pretty burnt out, if I'm speaking honestly. I loved my time there. I learned so much. I made incredible friends and built up this amazing network of colleagues. But I was always itching to do my own thing. So I thought that the move to Canada was just the perfect impetus for me to leave my job and take a breather. And I think a little bit about me too. I didn't grow up very wealthy. And so it was important for me to be very just like financially savvy, save a ton of money. So I was very frugal during my time at Google, saved a ton of money. And I think having that safety net gave me a bit more confidence to actually take the leap and not have to worry about the next thing. In between, I did some consulting before I started Playfield. So there was like a little bit of income coming in, but I think having that cushion, right? Because I think that's important. And that's often the barrier for why a lot of people don't leave their jobs and go in straight away. For me, though, I did find my role at Google was very just demanding in many ways. So when I was trying to start something on the side while I had a full-time job, it was just too much for me. So I think having time off really helped. And then that's when, again, Bailey came into our lives, and then the rest is history.
I love that. I think you get to a point in your career where it's like, you start to believe that even if you're about to take this big chance on something that you don't know how it's going to work out, that you are your fallback plan. And you could consult, you could probably get another job like Google. It gets to a certain point where you have that. And I know for me, before I started my first company, Tech Ladies, I also left a job at Google to do that. It's a big, scary thing to do. And I think that I had to just sort of recognize that, like, wait, the fallback plan is me being able to figure it out and trust that I will figure it out as I go. So I love that you have that too. I think so many people just feel overwhelmed at the idea of like how many steps there's going to be. And something I've always said to people is like, don't think like 20 steps ahead, think like one or two. I think you go back on these journeys too and you look and you're like, wait, if you had told me how hard it was really going to be, I like probably wouldn't have done it. So, I love that you also were telling us about how you listen to these podcasts and read a bunch of books on startups. So something I've seen is that a lot of people can get sort of like stuck there with that research phase and that listening phase. Like, how did you transition from I'm listening, absorbing, reading to then actually going and doing and getting this product out the door?
Oh, yeah, for sure. I think the first step there was you also can't build in silos, right? So you can't just have an idea and work on it and not tell anybody about it. I think there's kind of a balance here where you want to make sure you get enough feedback from the right people. And often it's like not talking to friends and family, but rather for me, it was dog owners. So I would go to the dog park. And this is when I had the initial conceptual idea for it. So it was like a drawing on a piece of paper that we had mocked up. And I went to the dog park. I would go up to total strangers. I would first ask them questions about their dog and like some of their just like behaviors and things. So one of the books I read about this actually is The Mom Test by Rob Fitzpatrick, which is a great book used in tech. But essentially, it's when you are trying to solve a problem, you don't want to prompt people with what you think will be the answer. Rather, you want to learn what their prior behaviors have been that would indicate what they might do next. So it was a lot of that initial research, asking qualitative questions. And then I would show them the drawings, be like, well, here's what I'm thinking about. I'd love to get your thoughts on this. Don't plant anything in their mind, but kind of let them tell you what they would need or what they would like to see. So having that really kept the ball going for me. And it was like, okay, now I have something here. I need to bring it to life. And so it's like, you need to know when you can spend some time thinking about it. Oh, the other thing I would also say is you don't need to write a business plan. When people have ideas or they want to start a business, I think writing a business plan doesn't actually help because you can pivot and change directions and things can change in an instant. And you don't want to be confined to a certain structure. I think you have an idea, develop the hypothesis, test the hypothesis, and then from then iterate from there. So the drawing came out into the first initial prototype, which was really just like hideous and really clunky. And we got feedback on how it felt, how it looked, how it worked, and then made that better and made that better. And before we knew it, we arrived at the final product. I mean, it took the course of, I would say probably like a year of actual like conceptual drawings to bringing the product to life. And that's probably normal. So also having some patience and giving yourself grace and knowing that it's a marathon, not a sprint.
I love that. I was going to ask a follow-up question. So as far as going to the park and talking to these people with dogs, what did you learn from them? Like, what did dog owners say that they wanted from this type of product? Or was there any takeaways you learned in general about people with their dogs?
Well, people love their dogs. And I think I knew that, but it's really different when you put it in practice. You go up to anyone with a dog and you ask them about their dog and they will stop and tell you everything, which is great because I do the same thing, right? If people come and ask us about Bailey, I'm an open book. And maybe the thing that surprised me a little bit was actually how positive a reception I received. And I couldn't tell if it was Canadians just being nice. But no, I think like the reception was actually really strong. And it was interesting to hear just what they needed with each type of dog too. So like if you had a bigger dog, there were maybe concerns of like, well, how strong is this going to be? Can I actually wear it without them pulling me down if they ran in a different direction, right? Or like the needs for the owner with a smaller dog might look a little different. And so you're picking up a lot of really rich insights which could also then inform future products. And that was really great. And I kind of kept all that feedback, sorted away in Notion, and it really got the gears
Such
going.
a scientific process that you followed, which makes me really excited because I feel like there are so many products out there that haven't necessarily gone through that process. And so they end up almost being the right thing, but not quite. And that can feel so disappointing. And it's really exciting and really reassuring to hear how much thought and effort went into it, that normalization of taking a long time to do it right, but then also being so willing to pivot, like you said, because things change incredibly quickly. I'd say more so than ever with all of the technology that we're constantly exposed to. And who knows what the next thing that's going to come up in the pet space specifically will be. So I feel like that's just such a good encapsulation of this really thoughtful approach to bringing something new. And that explains why Allison and I both reacted so strongly when we got to see the product for the first time and be like, oh my goodness, everything has a purpose. Everything is something that I've experienced before out on a walk. I feel like that is such good affirmation there.
Thank you. That really means a lot. In terms of it being scientific, I think some of it was learned behavior from coming from the tech world, right? When we were trying to build an app for the first time, we started out with the user feedback, and then we had, the minimum viable product, like what's like the most basic model that can get off the ground, and then test with that and make it better. And I had also read a lot of books in tech around like the lean startup or 0 to 1. And I think some of the approaches there are super methodical. And so I applied it to building a consumer product.
What would you say to people who are maybe listening to this podcast? They have dogs. Maybe they have an idea brewing somewhere. It's something they always thought about or always wanted to do or launch. I guess what really high level or specific advice would you give them?
Yeah, if you have an idea, I would say test it. Go talk to people. Go analyze and try to do it outside of your own circles too. So for example, for me, it wasn't just dog parks locally. I asked friends to introduce me to their friends. So I wanted a different, like a separation of connection, right? And talk to people in various cities, like in London, San Francisco, LA, people who I thought would be my target demographic. And that way I gathered a lot of data across different age ranges, female and male, which then, of course, like for this product, definitely geared more towards female. But I think the first thing is just start. I have so many friends who have come to me with ideas and they're like, oh, I'm thinking about this. I'm thinking about that. Wouldn't it be cool if this existed? I'm like, that's great, but work on it, and you don't have to solve it overnight. Like you just need to do something for it today and then do something for it tomorrow and then keep going. And then before you know it, 3 months have gone by and you'd be surprised how much you accomplished in that time. So something very tactical that I do every Friday, I send out a recap email to myself because we're just a lean team of one, but eventually we'll be a bigger team. And I recap all the things that happened that week, our wins and our learnings, and our focus for next week. And so I have an archive of all the things that we've done. And it's really cool to see this time last year where we really didn't have all that much, right? And now a year later, we've launched, we have customers, we have a community, we've got a brand, we're growing. So a lot can happen in a year.
I feel like one of the reasons that sometimes it's easier to dream and dream and dream about an idea and not actually start working on it is because if you keep it as a dream, it never gets tarnished. It's this thing that you are in theory working towards and it's always possible. And if you try it and you fail at it, then it becomes the thing that you really wanted to do that didn't work out. You said earlier that mistakes are just part of the deal sometimes. How have you prepared yourself for the possibility of things not working out? Was it experiences at Google, traits about you? What would you say to someone who comes to you and says that, that's part of what they're struggling with?
I think that's a really good question. It's something I struggled with earlier in my career because I had started at Google. So much of my identity was tied to Google, right? Anytime I told people I worked there, it was like there was a reaction that I received. Even the way that we self-identified, we called ourselves Googlers. So I felt like my work was so intrinsically tied to my identity, which was difficult when things don't go well at work. Then you feel that it takes a hit on your self-worth. So that was something I honestly had to work through. Even when I left Google, suddenly I didn't have that community anymore. I couldn't figure out, I didn't know what my purpose was, which is almost sad to say because so much of my time was tied to work. So there was definitely work to be done to separate that. And then in terms of like developing, I guess, the tolerance for things when things go wrong, I think separately, I've also had some challenges in life. I've had to care for like a loved one in a way that was just very extremely mentally and emotionally taxing. And it was through that struggle, actually, that I realized I was a lot stronger than I ever thought I was. It's almost like you have to go through the storm and see that you survive. And you're like, oh, I'm actually capable of a lot more than I thought I was. And the thing that I learned from that experience is that no matter what, if you don't give up, right? If you're not willing to give up, you will eventually succeed. And I really genuinely believe that. Like if you're open to feedback, you're open to pivoting, you're open to asking for help, and you're not stubborn about the direction you're going in, as long as you don't give up, you will be fine and you will eventually be successful.
It is so true. Some of it is just staying in the game long enough. I know at our last company, we had competitors who had raised so much money. My first company was totally bootstrapped, which is, really risky personally and everything to do. And I'm so glad that I did it that way. But I think like something I really learned was exactly what you're saying, which is like, you just kind of have to go through it to see if it's going to work out. But you can't try to plan everything. There's so much stuff that's going to happen that you don't know anyway. So I think just being flexible and willing to like fail and learn. And people talk about this so much. This is such a Silicon Valley thing, right? If you're not from the tech space, a lot of our listeners are like pet people. And I just feel like we talk about it all the time of like failure is so great and all of that. But I think something that's so interesting that I've learned is that like I thought I kind of had like failure down. And then part of what Haley and I talk about a lot is even just training and being with my dog brought so much of that up again too. I was like, wait, I've failed at like jobs where like money was on the line. And then I've got this like dog that I'm training and I'm somehow learning failure all over. It's just such a humbling experience, such a different experience. So I love the combo that you have of launching something totally new in the pet space and how those things kind of like interplay off of each other. I feel like anybody who's trained a dog from scratch, like if you did that, you can start a company in the pet space too.
Yes, it's just as rewarding too, right? When you see how much of the time and effort you've invested in training your dog and seeing how their behaviors change or how well behaved they are, you're like, man, that was a lot of work, but wow, that was worth it.
Right. It's like you sort of get to own something that you can be proud of. Like you own the highs and you also own the lows, right? It's like same thing for running a business, dog training. So much stuff in life is just like that. So I love talking to somebody who's sort of like been in it both. So this is something that Haley and I talk about a lot.
What do you think success looks like in the future?
I would love for Playfield to be a household name. I would love for that to be the case. I think there's so much we can do and we want to do. So we are bootstrapped and of course a bit limited by capital, but in the beginning at least. But we definitely want to expand our product lines. We want to come out with really cool things that solve actual problems. So in the near future, one of the things I'd like to launch is Playfield Labs, which would be an in-house incubation studio where we bring real problems and try to work on solutions for them. And this might be something that actually transcends textile-based goods, which is what we're starting with now. And maybe there's like a tech slant to it in the future. But working on things there and just making sure that we keep that nimble and just quick spirit with us, even as we grow, so that we can really stay on our toes and stay the innovative company that we started as.
Yay, I love that. I love that it's like innovation from the start too. And I also love that you're thinking big about this, so beyond just the first product that you have. I think one of the hardest parts of being an entrepreneur is being able to sort of like do both. You have to like answer the emails and do the little tasks, especially if you haven't raised any money. You're doing really everything. But then you also have to think big enough. This could be big enough to have Playfield Labs someday, like, and to hold both of those at the same time while you're building this company. I think you're like so on the right track for this. And I'm super excited like to see how you grow this and where this goes. I think it's going to be great.
I hope so too. We're just starting, but I will say the pet space is so much fun. It's so collaborative and it's just a great community. So if you're going to build anything, definitely build in pet. And I think there's a lot of room for newcomers too. It's not overcrowded at all. I think it's a great place.
Absolutely. It's something we talk about all the time. There's a huge market. So many people have pets. And on top of it, as you said, there's not that much innovation coming in at the level that we saw when we were working in tech, right? Like in tech, it's like everybody's launching something. Everybody's getting funding for all sorts of their next pizza delivery app, whatever. That was like the case for 10 years in tech. And that's not happening in the pet space. So yeah, if you have an idea, there is room for you and a huge market. And I believe that too. And part of what we're doing at Juniper is really wanting to support these up and coming brands and emerging brands who are launching things that are really functional, really well designed. I think that's only the need for that is only going to grow. And I'm super excited to work with you more as you get this out too. So thank you so much for being on the podcast. This has been such a good conversation.
This has been super fun. This is my first pet podcast or even first podcast I've done related to Playfield. So thanks for being there from the beginning.
You're our first guest, right? Yes, that we've actually recorded with. So we'll be rolling out a bunch of episodes with guests starting soon, but super excited. You're our first guest.
Amazing. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for coming on. That's all for today. To learn more and discover the best handpicked pet products, visit Juniper at www.juniperpet.co.